Welcome back, you filthy exiles. And yeah, with the announcement this morning and obviously patch notes, we have now confirmed that EARTHSHATTER Zerka did not get nerfed. And in fact, is probably buffed. Now, I did do a leveling test over the last week to basically get this up and running to where it is now. Am I going to play EARTHSHATTER Zerka? Well, the question there is Perforate worth playing more than EARTHSHATTER Zerka? And I'm sort of leaning towards Perforate because it's different. I haven't played it before. But also EARTHSHATTER Zerka is like a tried and true, so it's going to work. Pardon me. And it did last league. So basically what you can see here is my test. And obviously I've got all the Breach MTX on it. How it fundamentally works is we have automatic or auto exertion, right? And we then trigger like multiple war cries, which is in our setup. And right now this is with absolutely garbage gear. So pardon me. So we've got automated Infernal Cry, Intimidating Cry, Seismic Cry, and General's Cry right now, right? We don't really need to run any other auras outside of we have Arrogance set up with Clarity. And this is the Endgame like early mapping tree that we're using here. This gets up to about T5s. Horrifically bad axe. We did get really lucky with the armor that dropped as well, so that was pretty good. Our reses are not capped by any measure. Like, we have lots to go with this. But we do get to like 15 to 16,000 armor with everything buffed. And pretty much how it works is we rely pretty heavily on our rage stacking. So we have like Battle Trance, we have Rage Mastery with +7. We take the rage nodes down here with Vengeance. And for every rage, we also get 1% armor. I think we get about 40... Yeah, we get 49 rage right now, so we get a 49% armor increase when we have rage. Now, the biggest problem with that is obviously, you know, you got to get the rage up, right? So that's one of the disadvantages of this build. This is Ascendancy deficient as well, so we don't have Rite of Ruin, which is the last Ascendancy that we need. All this is in the tree, by the way, and we're going to talk through the trees very soon and the leveling progress, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of what this build actually looks like. So this is like just running like basic maps, and for the point of not getting absolutely destroyed in maps, we'll take this map here, which arguably is actually not the easiest map I could choose. And let's just do like a quick leveling run. So this is a T4 Alkengode map. We don't need to worry about aura problems, and obviously I've tried to take into account the fact that, yeah, I've got the Breach Hand MTX is cool. I've taken into account the fact that, we've got no more mercs and stuff like that. Now, you'll see the big issue right now is my resistances are bad, but my damage is not bad. Now, this is, a level 71 area with level 69 character. And basically, all you're going to do is just slam the ground and blow up. Now, the big thing to remember here is that you need to get, if you want to optimize damage, you've got to get up to like, 16, oh sorry, you have each hit drops 16 shards, so you need 18 shards you have as your cap. So you need to have up to 18 shards active to do the most amount of overlap damage. But there is an on-hit effect, and we'll talk about that in the POB soon. So as you can see, it really does just like cheese through the whole game. We have automation set up. Now, some people run cast when damage taken. I prefer automation. And can this delve? Well, the tree that I sort of benchmarked this off got to about 2,000 depth delve, and then obviously I've made a fair few changes and included things like Defiance of Destiny. The helm you'll need will be the unique Warcry helm. That gives you an increased buff per Warcry. So as you can see, you sort of just roll through, and every now and again you might hit some more Warcries. We've got some manual cast Warcries, which will be your rallying cry because you get elemental resistance, and if you have overexertion on, you can't take advantage of it. So we hit the boss, right? Now, they may kill us. They're probably not gonna. And basically, you can see it does, like, a pretty decent amount of damage, right? And this is, like, Alkengode T4, straight out of, like, maps. 4 links set up, crap set up, nothing's leveled up. Absolute scuffed gear, and this is in the POB. And the reason why I built it like this is that you could see, like, the build will work. Anyway, let's get into the tree, and I'll talk about the endgame tree that this is running, or like the tree that this is running right now, so you can see in a bit more detail. So we'll talk about gearing and all that sort of stuff, and also run through the leveling after that. And then I'll also give you a run through the more optimized tree that gets into insane levels of damage, but it's a high investment component. And that should get you on your way with gearing up. Also in this guide, let's just get back to the hideout. Also in this guide, I'll put all the progress trees in down below. Now I've only accounted for like the leveling in the actual POBs in the actual leveling guide and not the gear because it's just pointless at that point, right? And then obviously the endgame trees, I have the different week periods. So the trees that we have here are, you know, I'll give you, this is the 1 through to early mapping. And this gets up to about T5 on absolutely horrific gear. You don't know how to play the game. Literally, deliberately made it like that. Then we get to day update 2, which is day 3 to 4 progress. We're getting a bit stronger. Week 1 progress. Then we're up to, we've got a Defiance of Destiny and Echoes of Creation Helm. That's like getting up into the higher DPS levels. And then obviously we're getting into Mage Blood territory at the very end of it, which is our high octane, like we can take down big Chongus bosses and face tank everything sort of stuff. We're probably going to talk about the Defiance of Destiny setup. And I'll leave you guys to look at the Mage Blood if you want to progress it further. I've tried to like benchmark and tune the trees and everything to make it all work as best as I can. Obviously, you can see that on a leveling sort of level test setup, it all works. And if you want to see how I progress this, I've opened up the live streams on YouTube and they'll be linked with the 3 progress leveling sort of leveling sort of live streams, so you can see how I leveled it and everything. It's a little bit slower than what I would usually intend to level up on a day 1 league launch, but it'll give you a good idea of how I did it. So there's no like mucking around or facetious play here or anything like that. Anyway, let's get into the build leveling build league starter guide and talk about how to make this build work. Okay, so this is our leveling POB, right? So starting from the very top, so we've got endgame maps down the bottom. You'll see it'll have everything down here. Now, endgame mapping, if we just look at configuration, I've left like everything unticked. We assume we have like max rage because you're going to be operating at max rage the whole time, right? Solar Brian King, Solar Tukahama. We have Blood Rage, which gives us frenzy charges, and endurance charges we get because essentially, you know, we have this here, and you could also run Enduring Cry, which is going to give you endurance charges as well. You're only going to get like 6 endurance charges with the setup, and not even with this setup, because we just haven't taken those nodes yet. So you're only going to get 4 endurance charges because there's only stamina that's been selected here, and we don't take anything in the ascendancy that gives us that. So configuration side, nothing else is ticked. What have you used a war cry? We have more than 5 war cries. I think we have like 6 or 7. But we just assume 5 in here just for simplicity. Nothing else is ticked. If it's on full life, it does nothing. If we apply shock, like you put 30% in, it's obviously going to do more damage. So if you're looking at league starters, look for stuff like that. Crushed, I don't have any sources of crushed right now. Intimidate, maybe somewhere in the build, but at this stage, just leave it all unticked because I just want to show this being an absolute garbage setup, but it gets the T5 maps with no effort. So it means when you put any investment into this whatsoever, you're going to get to 2 stone without any issues whatsoever. This is Guardian and Pinnacle boss damage as well. So then we talk about like the skill setups, right? So if we just go back to here, right, and this is all captured in the POB. So in the helm, we're running Life Tap, Automation, Molten Shell, a Blood Rage. In our weapon, we got Earthshatter, Fortify Support, Pulverize, and Overexertion. Now, obviously run Fortify, it does drop my damage down, but I don't have a 5 link. If I had a 5 link, I would be running Brutality. In fact, yeah, I would be running Brutality and then, you know, melee, increased melee damage. But at this stage, Fortify just gives me better defense early on. In our chest, we're running Herald of Purity, Leap Slam, Rallying Cry, and Enduring Cry. We pop ourselves, and the reason why is because we want the self buffs. If we put those on an auto exertion setup, then we're going to have a bad time because we're not going to get the benefit of number 1, Rallying Cry with resistances. I think that's resistances. No, the increased damage, sorry. And then obviously Enduring Cry gives you 2% life regeneration and obviously gives you, you know, endurance charges and everything else. So you won't get the advantage of that if you don't actually pop it yourself. Then in our gloves we have, pardon me, Auto Exertion, Intimidating Cry, Infernal Cry, and Seismic Cry. And then in our boots, I've got Arrogance with Clarity, and you want to break the links. So you want 2 links and 2 links. You do not want a 4 link here. and then General's Cry and Auto Exertion, because if you have that on the Arrogance with the Auto Exertion, that's going to reserve your life pool and not your mana pool. And then the very end of it, we have a decent amount of mana and we're fully sustainable. Now, the reason why we do the Arrogance setup with Clarity is this fixes any other residual issues that you have with the build around sustaining mana, and that's why we can actually, pardon me, that's why we can actually take Life Tap out of our 4-link setup in our Axe, and we can basically like go ham and have like a full setup, and we can cast like at 16 mana and 3 life. Some of the other ways that we deal with mana in this build as well is we have the Cannibalistic Rite node, and that's obviously giving us mana reduction cost as well. And I think there's also, yeah, the Tireless nodes as well. Pardon me. So we get 3 plus 3, so we get 9%, we get 15% reduced cost of skills as well. So we get like the skill down to like, you know, almost minimal, which means we can fly by the edge of our seat with our Earthshatter. And now if we notice something, I did goof because these nodes here do nothing except for give us attributes for the time being, which is something that we're actually quite starved on in this build as well. So, you know, we need to focus on how we get enough intelligence and dexterity into the build. So that's it for this like basic setup. Also, just like talking about like gear wise in the setup, as you can see, like in this initial tree, bad axe, the helm pretty bad. We did luck out with the chest piece, but again, like there's no really good attributes outside of the armor on this, and it's still low roll and scalable things. The other things here, we've got our gauntlets, we've got greaves that, you know, minimal movement speed, and like some basic elk bench crafts, right? Ruby rings, garbage rings, absolutely dog-ass. And then our belt is pretty bad as well. So I don't even have the flask ticked on. Like if we tick flask on, it's going to make our build look a little bit better, right? Increase damage, increase defense, and stuff like that. I set it up like this because I just wanted there to be no doubt that this build works. It's really, really solid. We have Corrupted Blood immunity from our Protection Mastery here, and basically the goal is trying to overcap the reses as soon as possible. So pretty much where this is at is you just continue to progress upgrades. So just talking about like basic, like, you know, leveling up. So pretty much where you're going to start with the POB here is you just level up. You want to always go and take these life nodes here, move into Warrior's Blood, move up in Heart of the Warrior, into Born to Fight, and then Versatility. Now, the reason why I always go for Versatility on melee characters first is because you are deficient very early on in accuracy. So you want to run Precision and this, pardon me. And so then we get to the end of Act 2, and I mapped this as I was running through, right? So this was my live run in PoE 1 that I've done over 3 streams. So then we move up into Measured Fury. This one additional exertion does a lot of additional damage, and then we want minimum power. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to accumulate power because we don't run things like Red Blade Banner. We need to make sure we get as much power out of our... We don't have infinite power like we would with Red Blade, or... don't know why I got to get croaky voice now, or with the Chieftain Ascendancy called Sun's Roar, right? So we've got to find power anywhere that we can. Then we move through Juggernaut. This gives us life and armor, up into axe and damage. Pardon me. Then we go to Act 3. We get Slaughter. We're going to come down, take a few attribute nodes here, but we're also going to come up and grab the Battle Trance nodes. And this is also where we're going to take Rage Mastery, and we want the Inherent Loss 20% faster because it doesn't really affect this build. This is when we then take Resolute Technique, and we don't need Precision after this point because we can't do crits and we don't need accuracy. So you no longer need Precision, so you can remove it out of the build. And all this, by the way, is in the notes that are provided here, and we're about to talk about the act by act leveling of how you do all this too. Then in Act 4, or by the end of Act 4, you're going to come down, grab this first armor node here because we're going to go up into Inexorable. And then we come down, we're going to grab Bastion Breaker and 10% increase more damage. That's just flat damage scaling. Act 5, we're then going to finish off, or we're going to start branching into these points here for elemental resistances. We didn't really do anything else with the build. We did take an attribute point here, or sorry, a basic jewel socket, so we could socket in jewels, and 1 point over here. Act 6, this is when we branch into Cloth and Chain and Golem's Blood, which is a huge amount of life and regeneration. And then we start branching into the next Vengeance node for Rage. We also took Bloodless here as well, because it's just good to have. Now, The reason why we don't take any more of these is because there's no point overcapping if you don't have your reses capped. So you're just wasting the points early on when you could just put it into convenience and damage. We also take an inexorable too because we need that to get further into the build. Then at Act 7, we're taking Barbarism. We then took Cannibalistic Rite and the 12% Mana Reservation Efficiency node. And then we completed the Rage Mastery node. And you'll notice down here, we're able to get more power. So Warcries grant 1 rage per 5 enemy power up to 5. So we just get more rage. Like basically we Warcry a lot, so we're going to be keeping our rage meter capped, right? Then we go to our Act 8. We take Champion of the Cause. You won't need this later on, I noticed. So I think I removed this later on in the bit, but right now it did the job. And we start moving into the life regeneration nodes, and we start moving up into the tireless node. I really like Hardy because I like the high regeneration, but if you don't think you need it, just change it and put it in the damage or something, or defense or something like that. So then by the end of Act 9, we've taken Hardy. We've almost finished this tireless node series up here. And there's really nothing else that we've done to the build at this stage, aside from those 2 areas. Then by Act 10, this is when we really start to switch and chop and change. So we've removed the Champion of the Cause. We've also capped out a Prismatic Skin and Protection Mastery for Corrupted Blood. Down into the 2-handed Mastery because we found out we needed damage into kinetic impacts. And you want the 40% increased damage against rare and unique enemies. Gets a lot more damage than if you change it into like the 60% damage. It's misleading because 10% attack speed is quite significant with this build. So we want to keep it there. So then we're going to also take the Impale Mastery points here. We're using a 2-handed weapon. So then we want the additional Impale there. We finished Hardy, we finished Tireless, and we also go up to Devotion. And this is going to, give us 10% life, which is pretty significant on this build. And then by like T5 early mapping, this is when you got 69 points. So you've collected all the points in the campaign. This is pretty much the look of what your tree should start to take the form of. Now, the big things here are scaling more life, scaling more armor, scaling more damage. Throughout the whole process of leveling this build, you want to continually be upgrading your axe the entire time. If you're not upgrading your gear and axe, you're going to notice you're going to start dying. Now, crunch points for this build. Act 3, 4, and 5. Sorry, not even Act 3. Act 4, 5, and potentially 6 hits a bit of a limit break point. So basically, that's when the build starts to die a little bit more, slow down, things like that. Part of that is deficient gearing. Part of that is you're not res capping. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this build to play hardcore SSF or hardcore initially, because there's just too much balance that you need to do early on to be able to get it, to do that type of thing. Or you're just playing at a much slower pace, right? Which is pretty normal for hardcore builds. If you do not like playing as the Zerker, you could also switch to the Jug. And with that, I would just be going like Undeniable, Unstoppable, Unbreakable, and Untiring, and starting with Undeniable and probably Untiring, and then Unbreakable, and then Unstoppable. And the reason for that is like, you're not going to die, right? You're going to do, half the damage, but you're not going to die. I'll leave that up to you to determine that as well. Now, the other big thing to bear in mind about how Earthshatter works, and just talking about this mechanically, so you have an initial impact, but you also have a spike, right? Now, the way that the skill's written here, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, so basically you put out, in this case, 15 spikes. It does look like it's different. We're going to ignore that. So if you look at the skill, right, it says, well, that's right. Yeah, it levels up as you level up. So you put out 15 spikes, and when you fissure, you create 5 spikes. So the damage, from my understanding, and the way that a single spike calculates is you have 88.4 thousand DPS for spikes, right? So on that basis, when you're calculating damage, it's going to be 88 times 5 in one hit is 440,000, and then 88 times 15, which is your peak, is 1.3 million DPS. That assumes that every spike that you put down has enough AoE to overlap. And if you're overlapping and shotgunning, then you're going to do an absolute metric ton of damage, which is also why Seismic Cry is really important. So that's basically where the big damage from this build comes from, is it's an overwhelming amount of damage from the sheer volume of spikes, and it's why so many people play this build, and it's also why it's got huge clear speed potential. So that's pretty much the big thing that you need to bear in mind. Now, some people would be like, you're inefficient if you're not putting down all 15 spikes and then popping a Warcry. That is true. But when you're running Echoes of Creation later on, it's going to be irrelevant until you get to a boss. The other problem is you want to pop like all those Warcries at once as much as possible, because that's going to mean that you're not going to have an issue when it comes to like front loading damage all in one hit. Whereas like the reality here, to set this up absolutely perfectly requires perfect amounts of timing, and I don't think it's really necessary because this build just does stupid amounts of damage anyway. Arguably, if you get your last ascendancy point, that's the damage output, but in this case, we do have the last ascendancy point, right? So we assume we take down a Zyro. That's basically the main fundamentals of the mechanics of the build. Like, that's why there's like really nothing complicated in the back end. You're really just stacking rage, and then you hit the ground as many times as you can, like this, right? And then you're going to pop them all, and they all just blow up. And that's basically how this build works, fundamentally. Anyway, that's it, like explaining the really basic POB. So let's just talk about the leveling for a bit, and that's, by the way, in the POB in the notes section as well. So if you go to notes in the POB, it's act by act telling you exactly what you need to do to get this to tick. My guide is not as detailed as what others may be, and the reason why is because you just make it far too complicated unnecessarily. So I've tried to really hone this down to make it as simple as possible. So these are changes by exceptions from the very start throughout to getting to Endgame, which is where this POB is. And then beyond that point, you're then going to refer to like these mega POBs here, and that's going to tell you a lot more about it. Anyway, let's talk about that stuff now. Okay, so when starting out in Act 1, you're going to go, your first skill is Ground Slam plus Bleed as your first setup. You want to migrate to EARTHSHATTER as soon as it becomes available. I believe this is pretty much like this would be about halfway through Act 1. And then you want to go Chance to Bleed plus Faster Attacks once that becomes available on a 3-link. Equip Leap Slam. You also then want to apply Precision and Vitality after you defeat Brutus. And then the Warcry you want to run early on is Intimidating Cry. For Act 2, you're going to have the following auras equipped, which is Precision, Vitality, and Herald of Purity. The Warcries you'll then be running on self-cast will be Intimidating Cry and Seismic Cry, and then you should be at a 4-link point, so you're going to 4-link EARTHSHATTER with Life Tap, and also switch Chance to Bleed with merely physical damage, and also faster attacks. Okay, so for Act 3, we're going to have Vitality. We pretty much want to drop Precision at this point. And also our Herald of Purity for the time being. Then we're going to equip our Warcries being Intimidating Cry and Infernal Cry on an auto exertion setup. You can get this support gem from the library. Then on manual Warcries, we want to switch to Seismic Cry, and then our 4-link setup, we're going to adjust out faster attacks with overexertion. So this should now be EARTHSHATTER, Life Tap, added melee fizz damage, plus overexertion being equipped as your main skill setup. Okay, so for Act 4, you're going to start getting slightly weaker for the next 2 to 3 acts, but we're going to ascend and we're going to get Crave the Slaughter first. We're also going to add Automation, plus Life Tap, plus Molten Shell, plus Blood Rage to the build setup. For Act 5, there's no real skill changes, just keep progressing, but the biggest thing here is making sure that you keep focusing on res capping, life stacking, and also increasing the DPS on your axe. This will be something that you need to keep upgrading as you go all throughout the campaign. Okay, so once you get to Act 6, we're then going to switch our main EARTHSHATTER setup, and we're going to then use, instead of merely physical damage, we're going to put Pulverize in. This is going to significantly increase our AoE of our overlapping damage on our shards, or spikes, sorry. And then to fix any mana issues, you want to add an Arrogance plus Clarity setup somewhere in your build. You don't want this linked to any other auras. This is going to reserve life and also ramp up your mana regeneration so that you no longer have to use Life Tap. With Act 7, our main focus is just going to be leveling up into Warbringer at this stage. Okay, so for Act 8, or by the end of Act 8, sorry, I should say, we're going to make sure that we got Auto Exertion with War Cry set up with Intimidating Cry, Infernal Cry, Seismic Cry, and General's Cry. Our manual War Cries we're going to be running is Rallying Cry and Enduring Cry, and to do this we want to remove Vitality so we can afford Auto Exertion for more War Cries at the end of the day. For the end of Act 9, no major changes, just focus on resistance, life, regeneration, and a better axe at all times. Finally, for the end of Act 10, you want to aim, or during Act 10, you want to aim to ascend and get your third ascendancy, which is Aspect of Carnage. That leaves the last ascendancy to get, once you get past Act 10, into mapping as Rite of Ruin. Outside of that, you're pretty much just going to be looking for gear upgrades and the usual min-maxing that you get to endgame with, and that's where we're going to talk about the next tree. Okay, so now just talking about some more targetable endgame. So pretty much when you get to like more of the endgame sort of element of it, this is what your tree's more so going to look like. Now, this isn't like ultra min-maxed to the absolute hilt, but this is like, you know, you'd be farming T15s and whatnot. Now, we can reduce that down to level 96 because I know people will bring that up. And if we want to, we can just take that back, and that actually gets us to level 95 and drops a bit of our damage reduction. Level 94. There you go, guys. So basically, like, on this basis, this is pretty much your optimum in-game tree at an intermediate level. And we've got one with Mage Blood. I'll put that in the POB. That's a super high cost one. Now, the on-hit impact is about 4.1 mil, which seems like not a lot, but it's the spike damage that's big. So you have 18 spikes at level 20, and this is level 21. So you'd assume you'd have it by then. So you have 18 spikes, right? You create 6 fissures. So if you hit 3 times and you have an APS at 2.02, or sorry, your initial impact is, 2.02. That means that it's 2.8 mil in my understanding, multiplied by 18, right? So if you stack up, 3 hits, so then 18 is about, it says 51 million. I don't think it's going to be quite that. And in fact, like, divide by 2 for inefficient overlap, and maybe even divide by 4. Maybe say, like, if only a quarter of the spikes overlap in cluster, then you're going to hit at any one point for about 12.9 mil, right? And that's at a 25% efficiency level, right? That's sort of the gist of where the damage comes from with this build, and that's also why it's so strong and powerful. Life regeneration rate 693, leech 1.5k. We're looking at about 81,000 effective hit pool, but bearing in mind that doesn't take into account things like Defiance of Destiny, right? So Defiance of Destiny is going to give you an absolute ton of recovery with the 24% of missing life reserved, of unreserved life being recouped before being hit by the enemy, right? So that's going to make you a lot more recoverable in the setup. This does have Forbidden Flame and Flesh, but it's actually not the craziest one. Now, this one has a bit of a different one, I actually think. Yeah, it has Unstoppable. The one that you could also take could be Untiring. You get 469, which would be regeneration rate. You could go a number of different ways. You could go Unbreakable if you wanted. Unflinching is going to give you more damage and a bit of effective hit pool. The one that you could also take could be Tukahama's War's Herald, which is in the endgame tree. This is going to ramp your damage way up through the roof. But what I'm trying to say is, like, this build has a long way to go still before it's considered anywhere near where it needs to be, right? Now you are getting like 4 to 5 from the tree. That's not optimum. We can do that better ways. But we're running around with about 35,000 armor, fire cold res, max cap, chaos res, all that sort of stuff. We have 1 warning on the tree, which is a dexterity warning, and it's out by 10. So it's not too bad. So that's basically it for this. Now, configuration wise, again, I've got a war banner down. If you want to take that off, fine, go whatever. It is in blood stance because it assumes bossing damage. Sand stance is going to be lower DPS at the end of the day. But yeah, 49 rage, flask active. You've done war cries in the past, but I haven't ticked how many, so it just does the max that assumes that you've done all war cries in your tree. And time spent stationary 5 seconds because you assume you can take some big hits here, right? Frenzy charges from Blood Rage, endurance charges, which you can get from your War Cry at the end of the day, right? Now, there is a bit of tree rework here. in this example compared to the final POB. I'll let you figure that out from the first trees and whatnot as to how you want to go with that. But there's nothing wrong with this setup at this point. It'll work absolutely fine. And basically skill setups, again, like your main skill setups is your Earthshatter, Overexertion, Pulverize, Brutality, Fist of War, melee fist damage. You could switch Fist of War out for your Fortify, and then basically get rid of those 5 points and reallocate it somewhere else in the tree, right? The big damage dealing gear here, other skills, War Banner, Leap Slam. We've got, our Auto Exertion with Seismic Cry and Intimidating Cry, manually cast Rallying and Enduring. And we do add a Battle Mages setup on this with Punishment, and you could also do Vulnerability for this as well. That's just going to give you a ton more damage on top, right? Blood and Sand Stance, so you can switch between Blood and Sand, obviously. Herald of Purity, Foul Molten Shell, and that also has custom damage taken, but you could put that on automation at the end of the day. We might actually just change that to automation. Automation, which I prefer. And then, you could also run Blood Rage and things like that. So, that's split up between these at the end of the day. You probably want to put Blood Rage back into it, but I'll let you guys have a play with it, right? It's up to you guys at the end of the day. Actually, there is Blood Rage there, so that is in the Helm setup, and that's split between 2 sets of gems. You don't really need Blood Rage, so we could run like an inefficient automation setup there too. It's unnecessary to have that. But that's basically the like basic gist of the build, right? This is imperfect, this tree, and so the next tree beyond this goes well beyond. But this is like a good target point of like where you should be getting by like T16 level, going into like pinnacles. You're not going to take Uber pinnacles down at this point. The next tree would take that down, but I'll let you guys play around with that and do whatever you want. This is just to give you a really good idea of where you need to go with the build from progressing from leveling all the way through to early endgame, through to where we are now, which is late endgame, and then you get to like the min-max, like ridiculousness that you can get to with a build. But yeah, outside of that, item setups, you don't really need the Forbidden Flesh and Flame here. You could just turf them out altogether, and that one would be quite expensive. The other thing here, obviously, Watcher's Eye. This Watcher's Eye, you could do way better. +1 to Impales could be really good. Impale chance as an overall and or increased physical damage would also work. That would be if you had Pride. But Determination roll here, 8% reduction in physical damage is pretty significant because it pretty much almost offsets your Ascendancy for Aspect of Carnage if you were to take that. Now, you could get rid of Defy Pain here too. And Aspect of Carnage is just going to give you a ton more damage, but it's up to you guys. You can play around with this as you need to. Sort of left this open to however you want to go. Like all these trees are going to work at the end of the day and do you justice. Obviously, we've added in cluster jewels here too. So like Battle Hardened, Ironbreaker. You want like Mob Mentality is going to give you easy charge generation because you've got automated war cries. You get Onslaught as well, and 25% increased armor based on 5 power up to 100%. So that's going to be really useful. And then obviously Ironbreaker and Battle Hardened up here too. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, that's it. Now, Echoes of Creation, coming back to this, the big thing about this is it's going to give you an increased level of damage based on the war cries that you've exerted. You take a little bit of that damage back. It's like reflected back at you. So it's just something to be aware of as well. And obviously the biggie here is Defiance of Destiny. So that's going to keep you alive in most circumstances. This one uses the Stygian's Vise. And obviously this has a pretty good roll on it, but this is assuming like pure endgame. So you get to like 7.3 thousand total life with this particular tree. But you could be at like 5,500 with a far lesser of a belt with other utility setups and things like that, and it would still be really good. This is not a cheap axe. If you got something close to this, you'd be doing really well. And arguably this might actually be much easier to achieve with the new Foulborn mechanics as well, but we'll have to test all of that sort of stuff. In the final tree, pretty much you want the biggest axe you can possibly get. So this would take a fair bit of investment to get to this point. And obviously the overlap damage is going to do justice when like at 25% efficiency, you're getting like 12 million at 100%. You got 55 million if you get full overlap with AoE. But again, like this is just a good idea of where you need to take this build to progress it into the end game. If you don't like this setup, there's tons and tons and tons of Pwn Ninja setups that you could look at. But this is just one that you could use to get you where you need to go. Could you switch this out for jugs? Yeah, you could just switch it out for jugs. Literally just change the ascendancy, right? I'll leave it up to you guys. But yeah, anyway, this is the end game tree. This will be stacked in the end game trees that I'll provide. And all the end game trees will be day 3 to 4 progression, day 1 progression, Defiance, Destiny, and Echoes upgrade, and then obviously Mage Blood, which is like getting to like 14 mil per spike, and initial impacts like 20.2 mil. This is like super invested in trying to like min-max the living daylights out of this. So yeah, this is when you're like, you've got some big money like put into this build at this stage. But yeah, tattoos and all the rest of the stuff. Yeah. Anyway, I'll put all this in the description below. Okay, so I hope this guide's helpful. Like, if you want to play a Earthshatter Zerka, this is how you would do it. This isn't like a unique creation of my own or anything like this. This is a build that's ticked around for some time. This is just my take on how to approach it. I'll put all the POBs in the description, all the information you need, links to the live streams, absolutely everything that I could possibly hand. I'll put it in the description below for you guys. If you got questions, feel free to ask. Am I going to play this on League Start? I'm unsure. It's either this or it's Perforate Jug. I'm sort of leaning Perforate Jug, but I'll make that call over the next week, depending on how Perforate Jug feels when it gets out into mapping. Anyway, if you like this video, don't forget to like and sub to the channel and the Twitch and all the other stuff. If you want to support the channel, there's the membership there too. So there's that and the Patreon stuff. All the rest of the stuff is there. It's all in links below. But until the next video, I'll see you guys later on and have a good one.